Good morning from Kuala Lumpur. Welcome to the third part of the ASEAN Pacific episode series. In this part of our program, we are going to discuss India and Taiwan relations. My guest today is Dr. Sana Hashmi. She is living in Taipei and closely watching the situation in Taiwan. Taiwan is really in geopolitically and politically in a very significant position recently. Latest started the competition between Sino and US around the Taiwan Strait, made Taiwan more visible on international politics. And therefore, I'm going to Taipei today, and we are going to try to deeply try to understand the Taiwan and India relationship, because the India as a biggest democratic country in the region and has a different relation with China, and Taiwan, of course, is a different position in this relation. I'm going to start with the program with the question to Sana. Sana, welcome to the program. Thank you very much for joining me today. First, let me ask with the question, the bilateral relationship between India and Taiwan since 1919. What can you tell us about the Taiwan and India relations?
Thank you, Lokman, for inviting me to your show, and I'm very excited that we're going to talk about India-Taiwan relations and Taiwan in general. And I am based in Taipei, so I'm a visiting fellow at Taiwan-Asia Exchange Foundation, and a very good evening from Taipei. So your first question is about the bilateral relations of India-Taiwan since the 1990s. So it's a very apt question, because the unofficial relations between India and Taiwan were actually established in the 1990s. So this decade, specifically the year 1995, is crucial for India-Taiwan relations, as in 1995, India and Taiwan established representative offices in each other's capital. So Taiwan's representative office in India in New Delhi, and they also have an office in Chennai. It's known as Taiwan Economic and Cultural Center, TECC, and India's office in Taipei is known as India-Taipei Association. So 1995 was actually the beginning of the establishment of unofficial relations between India and Taiwan. And since then, the scope of the relationship, I would say, has been somewhat limited to economic, culture, education, science and technology. But what is more important when we talk about India-Taiwan relations is that the depth of the relation is something we really should look at. So there is significant progress in the relations, and in the last 25 years, so 2020 was the 25th anniversary of the establishment of representative offices. So a number of agreements in the field of economic, science and technology, education, tourism, culture have been signed. And in fact, Taiwan has established the TETRA office, the Taiwan External Trade Development Council, and also Taiwan Tourism Bureau offices in India. And one major development was that a few years ago, Taiwan-India Parliamentary Friendship Association was also formed, and we have seen that there have been several parliamentary exchanges between the two countries. So I think that was also a very significant development if we talk about the political relationship between the two countries. And on the economic front, which is, of course, the mainstay of the relationship, the relations are moving forward. India-Taiwan renewed the bilateral investment treaty in 2018, which is a very significant agreement between India and Taiwan. And the trade increased at least sixfold from the 2000. So in 2019 and 2020, the two-way trade stood at 7.8 billion, which was an increase from a little more than 1 billion in 2001. So When it comes to investment, there are more than 100 companies that have Taiwanese companies that have been operating in India, and the accumulative investment is more than $3 billion now. But one of the most advanced sectors in India-Taiwan relations is the science and technology, and there's an agreement between uh, DECC and ITA, which was signed a few years back, in fact, like more than a decade back. And apart from that, there's a lot of engagement between the research institutes and also the universities between Taiwan and India when it comes to the field of science and technology. And this is one of the reasons why we see a lot of Indian students that have been pursuing their PhD and postdocs in the field of science and technology. So I believe that if we talk about India-Taiwan relations since the 1990s, the overall trajectory has been satisfactory in my opinion. However, there's still a lot of potential in the relation. There are some aspects in the relationship that still remains underutilized. So I believe that some more steps could be taken to elevate the relationship, and we could certainly take cues from the past as to how to elevate India-Taiwan relations.
Sana, when in the Washington D.C., when Biden administration come to power, and the White House made clear that after the Biden, Washington will closely working with the like-minded countries. Like-minded countries, it means that Taiwan and India in this context really take close attention. When we look at the skins in the region, what is the Taiwan position between the United States and China, and in India-China context? How can we evaluate the situation of Taiwan, considering the crisis in the Strait, the Taiwan position? Yes.
So yeah, as in, I know what I try to do is not to talk about China when I talk about Taiwan and Taiwan's foreign relations, specifically with India, because as the stated policy of the Taiwan government has been, and in fact, a lot of officials have stated that if countries want to pursue relations with Taiwan, what they could do is to dehyphenate their Taiwan relation from their relationship with China. So I think, and in fact, when the former representative of Taiwan to India, when he was leaving for this new post in Taiwan, he also gave an interview to an Indian media outlet, and he said that the ties with Taiwan, India's ties with both Taiwan and China could go parallel. So I think we have to take cues from what the official position has been and what the officials have been saying. So I think this is a very good policy to start with, because China factor looms large when we talk about India-Taiwan relation, when we talk about US-Taiwan relation. Of course, the dynamics are totally different, the factors are different, but China is one factor that dominates Taiwan's foreign relations, and India is no different. So as we know that India adheres to the One China policy, and India was the second non-communist country to recognize the PRC after Myanmar in 1950. So it has accepted the One China policy, which has kind of acted as a deterrence when we talk about India-Taiwan relation. But in the recent past, what we also saw that India has stopped mentioning the One China policy in a joint statement, primarily because India has its own territorial disputes with China, and also because of India's dispute with Pakistan. So I think it was in 2008, that was the last time when India mentioned its adherence to the One China policy. And since 2010, we haven't really seen India talking about the One China policy. And in fact, in 2014, when this new administration came to power, Modi administration, then they were pretty firm with China. In fact, Prime Minister Modi, in his swearing-in ceremony, he also invited the former representative of Taiwan to India to his swearing-in ceremony. So there was this speculation that India is going to be more firm towards China, and India is going to be more proactive towards Taiwan. And in fact, in 2014, then then Foreign Minister of India, late Sushma Swaraj, she actually told her counterpart, Chinese counterpart, that if China wants India to acknowledge one China policy, it also has to respect one India policy. So we saw a policy shift when we talk in with respect to the India adherence to one China policy. So, of course, even despite all those statements and problems with China, we have seen that India's adherence or acknowledgement is actually not there, but adherence is very much there. So we have seen that nothing much has changed on the ground when it comes to India-Taiwan relation and one China policy. And I'm seeing this also because India has this huge border with China, and it's dealing with this more than 70 years old boundary dispute with China. So, if I may talk from India's perspective, this is also very complicated. So, if India decides that it talks about and or elevates its ties with Taiwan overtly, it is aware that it would need to deal with a more aggressive China and a more aggressive China on the border front as well. So I think to address this China challenge, India is actually looking towards other options. So, as you have also talked about the Indo-Pacific and the like-minded countries coming together to deal with the common challenges, and one of the common challenges is China threat. So, I think India is also trying to do what the other countries have been doing, for example, Japan, and to some extent the US as well. Of course, US Taiwan, they're a totally different case. Their relationship can't be really compared with India-Taiwan or, for that matter, Australia-Taiwan relations. But what India has been trying to do to tackle with this China challenge is to attempt to formalize the quadrilateral security dialogue and to have a concerted policy in the Indo-Pacific region. So I think India is kind of resorting to other options, and I think it's a good news for India-Taiwan relations as well, because India is not actually looking at Taiwan as using it against China. It is not actually looking at Taiwan as if it's some kind of card against China. So I think this is a good news, and India wants to engage Taiwan on its own merit. Of course, it has been a bit cautious. It has been a little slow, but as I said, the overall trajectory, the overall status of India-Taiwan relation isn't actually bad. So yeah, I think it's a win and it's positive development for the proponents of India-Taiwan relations. But since you already also asked about the US-China struggle and what is Taiwan's position, so Taiwan is China's core interest, and China terms Taiwan as its core interest. And for America also, the security of Taiwan is of critical importance. And US is bound by this agreement it had signed with Taiwan. And if we could trace the recent developments, and if we look at the recent developments, they also tell us that the US is not compromising on Taiwan. Of course, the Trump administration was very hawkish on China, and I believe they kind of used Taiwan as a card against China. So there were a lot of developments even during that point of time, and I have been in Taiwan for more than a year, and it was actually the Trump administration was perceived with positivity that there were several developments and there was so much support from the US towards Taiwan. But now that Biden administration is there, and I always say that whenever I talk about Biden administration policy towards Taiwan, that it's more action oriented, and they are not trying to use Taiwan as a card against China. So it's more action oriented, and there is of course continuity. So Biden administration has also shown its commitment towards Taiwan and its security, and I believe that it is getting very clear that for the US, Taiwan is not negotiable vis-a-vis its ties with China. And even if we talk about Taiwan security and why the US is being supportive, of course, Taiwan has got this bipartisan support in the US. But its security is also directly linked with the US and its relations with China. So any major change in the regional and bilateral dynamics will have a direct impact on Taiwan as well as other countries, including the US. So I think this is also one of the reasons why the like-minded countries are eager to cooperate to ensure Taiwan's security. and in turn the stability and the security of the Indo-Pacific region.
Sanat, when we come to the Taiwan internal politics, recently in international media we can more clearly see about the possibility of the China intervention to the Taiwan from the Taiwan airspace, and what is the public opinion or the political party seems to in the future in terms of the possibility of any intervention by China?
See, of course, it's a huge security threat for Taiwan, and in fact, last year what we saw that Taiwan was it got a lot of support from countries all over the world, and primarily because of its COVID-19 response. And China got aggressive with just not with Taiwan, but a number of other countries as well. And India is one example. We saw that the Galwan clashes turned violent, and it was and the disengagement is still going on, and there are still news that the troop is still there. So, and even with the South China Sea, and China was aggressive at multiple fronts. And if you look at China, this has not been China's policy. Getting aggressive at multiple fronts has not been China's policy at all. But since Xi Jinping has come to power and he has become the president for life, then all the China has been trying to deal with multiple fronts at the same time. And we saw that even China's intrusion into Taiwan's ADIZ, it was at a very large scale. And for the very first time, there were record breaking intrusions. So it has had implications for Taiwan and, as I said, for other countries as well. So with respect to DPP, of course, it refused to accept 1990 consensus, so that there's no dialogue between the mainland and Taiwan now. And what President Tsai and DPP, they have been trying to do is to increase their international outreach. And one of the policies to do that is, of course, the new Southbound Policy, of which India is at the core of the policy. So and China has been trying to poach Taiwan's diplomatic allies since 2016, and has been trying to shrink Taiwan's international space. So what DPP and what President Tsai has been trying to do is just to get its rightful place in the international space. And we saw last year how Taiwan dealt with its with the COVID-19 on its own, and now we are seeing a surge in COVID-19 cases. It's on its own. It's not getting a place on the high table, and even during the 74th WHA, Taiwan didn't get invited to be as an observer as well. So I think there are things that we really need to keep in mind, that Taiwan's policy is not aimed at China. They're really not looking for independence. What they are looking for is just to have status quo and just to increase the international outreach, so that it's beneficial, so that it's mutually beneficial. It's beneficial for Taiwan as well as beneficial for other countries. And Taiwan has several mechanisms for that. One, and I've been writing about this in in several of my articles. One is GCTF, Global Cooperation and Training Framework. So this is led by Taiwan, and we have seen the participation of the US and Japan, and some other countries have also participated. But I wrote in one of my articles that, of course, we have seen other countries' participation, but what I believe is that the participation is somewhat issue-oriented and is somewhat ad hoc approach. Their approach is somewhat kind of ad hocism. So I believe that countries also need to be more forthcoming towards Taiwan, and there needs to be a more institutionalized or formalized framework where Taiwan could participate regularly. So yeah, with respect to China or with respect to independent status quo, what the ruling party is looking for is maintaining status quo. So they haven't really talked about gaining independence, or even what they want is to have peaceful cross-strait ties. So I think this is what we really need to look at when we talk about the current government approach towards Taiwan, towards China.
Beyond the geopolitical importance and the security issues, what is the Taiwan importance for the other part of the world, for the democratic world, for other world? what is the importance of Taiwan as a small island and high technological capabilities? What is the importance of Taiwan?
So Taiwan is a very important country for a number of reasons. First, of course, economic status of an economic powerhouse is beneficial for a lot of countries. But we talk about democracy. Taiwan is a democracy. And historically, and if I could draw parallel between Taiwan and China here and how different these two countries are. So historically, Taiwan and China were seen as two models of Chinese nation. So Taiwan being a capitalist and a democratic country, while the PRC stands as a political and economic socialist model. So this idea of democracy have the power to choose their political representatives and have far greater political freedom and civil liberties than the PRC nationals, it actually proved that Taiwan is an open society. So this is something that is missing in the case of China. And even though it has adopted a capitalist model, China hasn't been able to give this kind of freedom to its citizens. So the element of constitutional democracy makes Taiwan different, and it gives Taiwan an upper hand when we talk about the rules-based order, when we talk about Taiwan's space at a larger international level. So the power of people makes Taiwan different. So there's political accountability in Taiwan that is actually tied to the highest political offices in Taiwan. And I think this is what makes Taiwan significant. And I believe this is one of the reasons why the liberal democracies really need to engage Taiwan. And Taiwan has, President Tsai Ing-wen has on several occasions stated that it believes in the rules-based order. It wants to play a larger and a meaningful role in the Indo-Pacific region, and its democratic ethos are somewhat aligned with other liberal democracies. So the idea behind the Indo-Pacific is that anyone is welcome that believes in a rules-based, transparent order. Indo-Pacific is inclusive, and Taiwan shares the values, the same kind of values that the liberal democracies are talking about, that these like-minded countries are talking about. So why Taiwan isn't yet a part of it? We have seen there are several countries that have spoken in support of Taiwan. US is, of course, there, and even Japan is there, and we saw the joint statement of the US Japan and US South Korea. So they have talked about for maintaining the peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. But also, in fact, last month or some time back, we also saw that the representative offices of the US, Japan, and Australia, they also issued a joint statement in support of Taiwan, but India was missing from there. So I believe that there needs to be more alignment among the like-minded countries when we talk about Taiwan, because I've said several times, and I've said several times during this interview as well, that Taiwan also believes in the values that are shared by the like-minded countries, and it's going to be mutually beneficial for Taiwan as well as the major stakeholders and the countries that have embraced the Indo-Pacific order.
When we talking about the regional position of Taiwan and the related the South China Sea and the US-China competition in the South China Sea, what is the importance of the Taiwan geopolitically, economically, and in terms of the political ideology? What is really the Taiwan position and importance for the regional countries?
As I've said, Taiwan has several common interests with the like-minded countries, and China has been aggressive in the East China Sea, South China Sea, border with India. So Taiwan plays a very important role geographically as well, and stability of the region, the Indo-Pacific region, will be disturbed if there is conflict between China and Taiwan, and if tomorrow China plans to invade Taiwan. So I think it's at the very Taiwan security is at the very core of the Indo-Pacific region. And this is why I believe that all these countries need to come together and also talk about Taiwan, and not just the South China Sea and other dispute, but also about Taiwan. How could they jointly secure Taiwan, and how could they ensure that Taiwan is secure? So I think it's very important. Then Indo-Pacific nations must also recognize that such a move by China is not only going to disrupt the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait, but the entire peace and stability of the region and also their own security as well. So this scenario is not in the best interest of the countries of the region. And so for that, I think it's very important how Taiwan is formally integrated into the regional deliberation and processes. So that would make countries more aware about the shared risk of a cross-strait conflict and how they could actually help Taiwan and support Taiwan. And in turn, this might actually pressure China or the region to find ways to avoid such a situation. And as I've said, that Taiwan's policies have been aligned with a number of countries. So Taiwan's emerging response seems aligned with the official policies of declared official policies of the countries such as the US, the Free and Indo-Pacific region, then India's Act East policy as well, and then Japan's expanded partnership for the quality infrastructure. So I think there's more alignment between Taiwan and the other countries, the other like-minded countries, and specifically the quadrilateral countries. So I believe there's more alignment, and this is why I keep saying that there should be more alignment of the quadrilateral countries on Taiwan. And I don't really advocate for the inclusion of Taiwan's part of Taiwan in the quadrilateral security dialogue, because of course the first reason is that these four countries are trying to figure out their own priorities and more alignment in their approaches. But of course, I haven't really seen any statement from the Taiwan side as well that they want to be a part of quadrilateral dialogue. But what I believe that there should be more alignment among the quadrilateral degrees, and what they could do is they could come up with a statement of support towards Taiwan. As I mentioned some time back, that Japan, Australia, and the US representative offices in Taiwan issued a statement in support of Taiwan, but India was missing. So I think the first step could be to involve India as well and to have more discussions and to include Taiwan in their joint statement as well. So I think this could be the first step, and this is how Taiwan is so important for the regional peace and stability, and also for the security of these countries as well.
When we're talking about the U.S. administration, the vulnerability of Taiwan, what is the difference between the Trump administration and Biden administration? What is change for Taiwan from Trump to the Biden administration? And when we consider the possible intervention of China, what is your prediction or observation between the Trump and the Biden administration toward Taiwan?
So as I said, that there is bipartisan support for Taiwan, and there were several positive developments during Trump administration, Taipei Travel Act, and also we saw several important visits last year. So and this has been continued this year as well. US just donated vaccines to Taiwan and trying to help not just Taiwan but other countries for procuring vaccine. So there is continuity for sure. But when Biden was assuming power, when there was transition, there were a lot of speculations that Biden might not be as proactive and forthcoming and positive towards Taiwan as Trump was. But I think this was proven wrong. I see same kind of enthusiasm for Taiwan in the US. But as I said earlier, that I believe that it's more, Biden policies are more action oriented. So first, as I said, that Trump didn't actually engage Taiwan just as Taiwan is. It was using Taiwan as a card against China. So it was primarily aimed at China and was actually not for Taiwan. So I think this is one of the major differences which I see between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. So I think this is one of the major point of differences. There's more action. You look at Biden administration; they aren't really issuing statements which are directly aimed at China, but they're more looking towards the ensuring security of Taiwan and stability of the region. And one point which I really thought about last year about Trump's Taiwan policy was that Trump actually didn't persuade other countries to talk about Taiwan. He didn't really motivate other countries to include Taiwan in larger discussion. So there were quadrilateral meetings last year as well, and there were bilateral meetings between Trump and his different counterpart. But for the but under Biden administration, we saw that Taiwan was mentioned in the U.S. Japan statement as well as U.S. South Korea statement. So I think there is this push from the U.S. side to make countries more aware about the prospects of engagement with Taiwan that was kind of missing during Trump administration. So I think that was a positive development. And maybe later we might. I know it's difficult, and it will take a very, very long time for India to fully embrace Taiwan and include Taiwan in a statement. But I think it is a natural and a logical step for a quadrilateral countries to issue a statement on Taiwan. I think this should be their priority as well, because if Quad has to be successful, there needs to be more alignment on a number of issues. So why not Taiwan? So I believe that this is one of the major differences when we talk about Trump policy as well as Biden Taiwan policy.
Sana, related to the U.S.-Taiwan relation, recently intensifying U.S. official visit to the Taiwan is related to the possibility of intervention of China, or related to the new Biden administration want to make the relationship with China very strong, or how can we read the visit of the Taiwan?
I don't see China invading Taiwan anytime soon. So, of course, Xi Jinping is very different from his predecessors, as I had already mentioned that that was not China's policy to be aggressive on multiple fronts, but China has been doing this at least since the time he has become the president for life. So, but if you look at Taiwan and if you look at China's Taiwan policy, we have also seen that this has been the policy of every Chinese leader to talk about Taiwan and to consolidate their claim on Taiwan by issuing statement and by warning countries that there are it's China's internal matter and they shouldn't really they shouldn't really talk about Taiwan. So this is in continuity. This is not something new that we have been seeing. So China has been aggressive. So just because so Taiwan has dealt with all these intrusions even before 2020 or 2021. So I think this is not something new, or on this basis, we can't really say that China is going to invade Taiwan. But what is different here is that America's commitment is firmer now. And I believe that this is going to act as a deterrence, that the US is there, and not just the US, other countries are also supportive of Taiwan. So I think this is going to be acting as deterrence. And then the second point is that China is still not at par with the US military. And without gaining this military parity with the US, it cannot really go for such a drastic step or invade Taiwan. So I think what it will first try to do is to consolidate its own military capabilities, build its own military capabilities so that it's at par with the US. And then what we also cannot forget, that China also has other territorial disputes, active ongoing territorial dispute. So what it would want to do is to consolidate other regions first, and it would want to resolve other territorial disputes so that it could shift its focus towards Taiwan. And China has done this before. So if you look at the trajectory of China's territorial dispute resolution, China goes for territorial dispute resolution only when there are tangible benefits out of the resolution, and when China has to shift its focus towards other issues. So in the 1990s, it wanted to shift its focus towards Taiwan, that it actually went ahead and resolved the boundary disputes with the post-Soviet states. One of the reasons was also to prevent these post-Soviet republics states establish diplomatic ties with Taiwan and engage. So this was one of the major reasons for China engaging the post-Soviet states. So we have to see that with all these territorial disputes going on and active territorial disputes going on with countries trying to find a solution to this China threat, it is not going to invade Taiwan like that. it wants to be sure that it is going to win the war, it's going to win over Taiwan, I think then only it can go for such a drastic step.
Sana, when we talking about the Southbound Policy, what is the importance of Taiwan and or position of Taiwan for the Southbound Policy and regional implication?
I think the new Southbound Policy is a very important policy. Of course, a lot of critique who say that it's just a policy which was it's a kind of elevated policy which was of Go South policy which was already existing. But I think it's totally different from the previous iterations of the Go South policy. The first is, of course, for the very first time, Taiwan is looking towards the countries of South and Southeast, South Asian region, and also Australia and New Zealand. So earlier, only the ASEAN region was a part of the Go South policy. The focus was on the Southeast Asian region. But for the very first time, Taiwan is actually expanding the geographical scope of the new Southbound policy. So now I believe, and I always say that there is this scope, why we really need to emphasize on the new Southbound policy, why we really need to talk more about the new Southbound policy is because that this is the first time that there is an official mechanism to engage India. And President Tsai Ing-wen has stated several times that we really want to engage India, we really want to elevate our ties with India. So there is interest. And the focus is actually not on China. Of course, they want to reduce their dependence on China and want to increase their international outreach by engaging the countries of the South Asian region and the Southeast Asian region, including Australia and New Zealand. But I think the focus is very outward looking. So the focus is on engaging the countries in the region. So Taiwan focus has been West centric, and this is one of the criticisms which Taiwan has got over the years. So I think this is through new Southbound policy, Taiwan is kind of trying to rectify that shortcoming in its foreign policy. So I think on the virtue of Taiwan looking at India through an official policy, I think we really need to see how Taiwan could engage India under the framework of the new Southbound policy. I think this is a very important policy. And of course, there are a lot of aspects which still remain underutilized. But I think if given proper impetus to the policy, it could actually turn into something that would be very, very beneficial for Taiwan's foreign relation. And in fact, as I said, that Taiwan is trying to rectify the mistakes. I won't call it a mistake actually, but I think Taiwan has overemphasized on its relation with the West. And as I said, with the new Southbound policy, there is this refocus orientation in its foreign policy. And if you look at if you look at the statement by President Tsai Ing-wen and other officials, and in fact at Yushan Forum, it's a high-level conference that deals with Taiwan's relations that discusses Taiwan's relation with Asia. President Tsai Ing-wen has actually said that Taiwan helps Asia, Asia helps Taiwan. So it actually tells us that Taiwan is focused on and is very interested in engaging the countries of the Asian region. So I think that's a very, very positive development, and that's a very good thing when we talk about this policy orientation in Taiwan's foreign policy.
So now when we look into the media outlet intensifying, we frequently see about the military and security issues in context of the China-Taiwan relations. But I would like to ask you as Taiwan president, what is the trade relation between the PRC and Taiwan and educational interchange between the PRC and Taiwan? What is the situation in this side?
There were a lot of economic linkages and, of course, ethnic affiliations, and there were a lot of inter-country marriages as well. But of course, under DPP, President Tsai Ing-wen, the relations are not the same as it was during the Kuomintang period. So, but even now, of course, because of the pandemic during COVID time, the situation is different. A lot of Taiwanese had to come back. So there are a lot of Taiwanese and a lot of Chinese who are working in Taiwan and China. So of course, the relation between people are very different from the relation between the DPP or the CCP. So there are a lot of there are a lot of linkages between both the countries. So this is one of the this is one of the problems which the DPP had to encounter. And when they talk about pulling out of China, and when they talk about minimizing the dependence on China, it's not as easy as it seems. But as I said, that the policies like the new Southbound Policy and the support that Taiwan has got from other countries, so I think it's just a step. It's just one step towards helping Taiwan in achieving this objective.
Related to this question, I would like to ask about the independence sentiment in Taiwan. And from the public to the political parties. What is the independence sentiment? How they look at the independence, totally independent from China, separate from China?
So DPP hasn't really said that it is seeking for independence or something that drastic. What they're looking for is just to maintain the status quo. What they're looking for is just to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. So, but there is this party NPP, which is openly pro-independence party. But if you may talk about the people, what exactly the people want, and in fact, the DPP has also said that we want to do what the people of Taiwan want. So they are with the people. So they have stated this several times. And so here, if I may talk about the people, so there was this survey by NCCU's Election Study Center, and they keep doing this survey. So in that survey, in 2020, 67% of Taiwanese, they identified themselves as Taiwanese. So this was actually a drop from the 56, more than 56% of people who identified themselves as Taiwanese. Sorry, increase, more than 10% increase. So in 2020, only 27.5% people identified themselves as both Taiwanese and Chinese, and only 3% identified themselves as Chinese. So there's a drastic change in the thinking of the people, of Taiwanese people. So, but most of the people, what they want, as the DPP's policy has been, that they want status quo. They aren't really seeking for independence. So I've also spoken to a lot of Taiwanese here, and they have said that they are just looking for status quo. What they want is to live a peaceful life in Taiwan. But if we talk about the identity, what is whom they identify, so 67% of Taiwanese, of people here, they identify themselves as Taiwanese. So I think it's a huge a percentage of people who identify themselves as Taiwanese. So I think there's a change in the thinking of people here as well.
Related to the regional development, I would like to ask a question about the possibility of Taiwan to joining the Quad countries. What is your opinion?
I think I'm one of the rare scholars who are a proponent of India-Taiwan and really do not advocate Taiwan's participation in the quadrilateral dialogue. I have mentioned this during the interview as well, that I don't. The thing is, I draw my arguments from official statements, and I haven't really seen a single statement by any Taiwanese leader, including President Tsai, in which they have said that they would want to be a part of something like quadrilateral dialogue. And it's just not about Taiwan. If you look at other countries as well, so quadrilateral security dialogue has China at the core of it. Of course, they haven't really. We just saw the first virtual summit of the quadrilateral leaders in March, on March 12th. So they didn't really talk about China, but for the very first time, all the four leaders, they actually refer to it as Quad. So there is more alignment now. But no matter what, even though they talked about vaccines, they talked about non-traditional security threat, we can't really deny that China is at the core of the quadrilateral security dialogue. And this is one of the reasons why countries would be a little hesitant to be an active part of the quadrilateral dialogue, because if you look at Germany, if you look at other countries, several countries that have embraced the Indo-Pacific, they have even talked about China's inclusion in the Indo-Pacific, given China behaves like a responsible stakeholder. And a lot of countries have said that Indo-Pacific is inclusive. And what a lot of people don't really realize when they talk about Indo-Pacific, that Quad is just one mechanism under the Indo-Pacific. So tomorrow, Germany, France, and India, they could also have their own trilateral, for example, within the framework of the Indo-Pacific. So a lot of people actually mistake quadrilateral with the Indo-Pacific. So I think that's why they also say that Taiwan should be a part of the quadrilateral dialogue. But President Tsai Ing-wen has said that Taiwan would like to be an active part of the Indo-Pacific region. So, as I said, I go by the primary sources. I go by what the leaders have said. So, I think it would be beneficial for all these like-minded countries to talk about Taiwan's participation in the Indo-Pacific. And I also said that Taiwan leads this GCTF mechanism. So I think GCTF could be incorporated in the Indo-Pacific, and other countries should also participate, not in an ad hoc manner, but in, in a way that's long term, so that Taiwan and countries could learn from each other's best practices. So there are other ways also to include Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific, but I believe quadrilateral right now is not the best option. First, because it's overtly anti-China coalition, and secondly, I believe even before the countries go for the expansion of quadrilateral dialogue, there needs to be more alignment. These leaders need to meet more among themselves so that there is more alignment on China, there is more alignment on other issues. So I think even if they go for expansion, if the countries are not going to be aligned on the issues, then what is the fate of the quadrilateral dialogue? Are we ready to see it shelved again, like it was done in 2008, 7, and 8? So I think if the countries want it to be a credible uh, minilateral mechanism, it's very important that the countries agree on their approaches, they agree on their what are their common interests and what are the shared concerns. So I think it's very important that there's more alignment even before we talk about the inclusion of countries such as Vietnam and such as Taiwan.
Sanad, in terms of when we're talking about the India-Taiwan relation, from today to tomorrow, what is your observation about India-Taiwan relation in the future?
I am very hopeful about that. Also because I have seen firsthand how India is perceived in Taiwan and among Taiwanese. First is that, and also before I was coming to Taiwan, I have said this several times, and I think we couldn't really emphasize in this enough, that Taiwan wasn't really known among Indians and in India before people got to know about Taiwan's COVID-19 response. But I was observing what was happening in Indian media and how people in India were talking about Taiwan. So I noticed that because of Taiwan's impeccable COVID-19 response, even regional news channels started reporting about Taiwan. So there was this curiosity among people that what is this country that is handling COVID-19 so well, when even the US and India and all those countries were not able to curtail the threat from the COVID-19. So even though a lot of people say it was because of the Galwan clashes that Taiwan became so popular, but but China has always been a factor in India-Taiwan relation. But I don't think that was the reason why Taiwan became so popular in India at that point of time. It was primarily because of the COVID-19 response. And also with the standoff and with the China factor, I also want to say that the border standoff between India and China has been the most common feature in the relationship. There have been several standoffs between India and China even before Galwan clashes. And in fact, in 2018, a lot of scholars and a lot of people don't talk about that, but the India's Ministry of External Affairs committee, parliamentary committee, they came up with a report after the Doklam standoff, and they actually recommended that India should establish diplomatic ties with Taiwan because China is not paying any heed to India's territorial sensitivities. But at that point of time, Taiwan wasn't really popular in India, wasn't really known in India. But I think it was primarily because of the COVID-19 response that Taiwan became a name in a lot of households, including my own household. So I think COVID-19 response played a huge role in Taiwan's popularity among Indians. And of course, then they realized, then the local people in India, they also realize, and also Taiwanese, they realize that India and Taiwan, they are dealing with the same threat, that is China's aggressiveness at India at the border and Taiwan for a very, very long time. So there was this common problem that the two countries were dealing. So there was this kind of solidarity towards each other. So I always say that we have to look at the positive developments. Even though the government has been cautious, even though the government has been slow, there was several developments that took place last year. So the unprecedented support, the unprecedented awareness about Taiwan and India was one of the major developments. Then there were a lot of developments like how Taiwanese government administration became more proactive towards India. There were several activities that have taken place in the past 1 year, be it the Diwali celebration for the Indian diaspora by MOFA, or several other festivals that have taken place. So I think people are at the core of India-Taiwan relations. Until the time we have this solidarity among people and we have this support for Taiwan among Indians, I see and I'm very positive about India-Taiwan relations. And I feel that even government has been forthcoming towards Taiwan. There are a lot of aspects which are slowly and steadily developing. So we just have to wait and watch. And also the India Taiwan Parliamentary Friendship Association was revived last year. So I'm hoping to see more parliamentary exchanges between India and Taiwan. So if I have to conclude, I would say that I'm very positive about India-Taiwan relations, and people are at the core of it. And what we are seeing is that people-to-people relations have been strengthened, are going to grow. So I think this is going to really strengthen India-Taiwan relations.
Sana, when we're talking about the COVID-19 process, what kind of successful job Taiwan did during the pandemic, and how Taiwan can introduce itself as an alternative country for vaccine production and to the other part of the world? What is the success of Taiwan?
There are a lot of factors. It's just not one factor. So I could list a few factors. So of course, the contact tracing is impeccable, and then there were even of course the government policies have been very effective. But we also have to give credit to the people of Taiwan. They have been complying with what the government has been asking them to do. So there are a lot of factors. Also, the team, the administration, COVID response team is also full of uh, professionals and epidemiologists and people who know what they are doing. And also, there's this kind of accountability within the leadership. So today only President Tsai Ing-wen apologized for the death of people due to COVID-19. So this is a thing which is rare, which we don't see a lot of other world leaders doing that. So also I think if we for the COVID-19 response, if we are actually giving credit to the government, we also have to give credit to the people. And also, we are seeing this spike in COVID-19 cases in Taiwan now. But of course, there's no exponential growth. It's actually at the same level, so it's not growing exponentially. So I think this is also kind of reaffirming. So even now, the government has been on its toes. Uh, there are different apps and contact tracing is going on. So I think there are a lot of factors that have helped Taiwan. And also, when we talk, so there are a lot of articles and there are a lot of people who have said, oh, Taiwan has failed because it was able to curtail it last year. It had put border restrictions in place and there were other factors as well. But now Taiwan has failed. But I don't see it that way. I think 2020 was a different year and 2021 is a different year altogether. Of course, after living a normal life, anyone could become complacent that it might not hit us now. So I think that's okay. And what they're doing right now and how they're responding to it, I don't really, as a foreigner living in Taiwan, I'm not very concerned about their response.
When we close to reach the end of our program, as a Taiwan fellows, what can you tell the audiences and the for future generations about Taiwan?
It's a very important question because, as I said some time back, that people are at the core of Taiwan's foreign relation and India-Taiwan relations. And I believe that students coming to Taiwan and scholars, academicians coming to Taiwan, it's equally important. So I was a Taiwan fellow last year, so I was in this Taiwan fellowship, which is administered, sponsored by Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I think it was a very good opportunity for me to know about Taiwan. There are a lot of scholarships and fellowships that have been given by Ministry of Education, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Taiwan. But the problem is many people aren't really aware about the existence of such opportunities in Taiwan. And I think it's primarily because my interest in Taiwan was it's primarily because I came to Taiwan and I was on this fellowship, and then I realized that not many people know about Taiwan. And of course, my job is to write about Taiwan foreign relations. But then I also realized that it's very important that if I am a proponent of India-Taiwan relations, what could I do to make it better? So I also started doing this advocacy and using my social media to make people more aware about Taiwan. So, one of the things I do is through my social media, my Twitter, that I post about various scholarships and fellowships about Taiwan, because I think the first step should be to come to Taiwan so that they know what they want to pursue. Because when we talk about foreign policy, when we talk about our writings, and you are in Malaysia right now, you would also agree with me that much of the writings on the region is very China centric. How many people are there who actually focus on Taiwan and Malaysia, and for that matter in India? We're just handful of people. So I think what we need is to have more and more students for, of course, Mandarin learning, as well as for doing academic assignments as well. And I think the MOFA Fellowship is a very good opportunity for scholars to come here on a short uh, term visit and to know more about Taiwan foreign relation, and to know the other aspects of Taiwan as well. I think it's very important. Even if we want to know more about China, I think Taiwan is such a good place to know more about China, to interact with Taiwanese scholars, because the knowledge on Taiwan is impeccable. So, and I think this is what I'm really thankful for, because before coming to Taiwan, my focus was China centric. My PhD is in Chinese studies. My entire work of 10 years has been on China. So I think this has been in Taiwan and being on that fellowship, and I'm on the new fellowship now, it has helped me to know Taiwan and to know China better. So I think more and more students need to come. There is this YU scholarship and the other scholarship, and more academicians and more professionals should come on this Taiwan fellowship. We need to have more engagement with Taiwanese scholars, because there's a there's this uh, contrast between Taiwan and China. Even if you go to China, you interact with Chinese scholars, they aren't as open as scholars in democracies. And I speak to a lot of Taiwanese scholars. They're very open about what they want to say, irrespective of their ideologies, irrespective of their political affiliations. So you could only do this in a democracy. And I always say that Taiwan is such a classic example of being a true democracy. So I think there are a lot of things which we could learn from Taiwan, but for that we have to come to Taiwan. We have to engage with the scholar community in Taiwan. So I think it's very important.
Thank you very much, Sana, for enormous information and knowledge about Taiwan. Hope we can meet in another program. Thank you for audiences also watching us from across the world or the future who watching this video. Now I am going to the end of the program, and thank you very much, and again, thank you very much for watching us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to be on your show and talk about Taiwan.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye. Have a good night.
Good night.